shown ourselves as strong partners, and there's evidence to that. So should all of us do this important homework? The bodyguard has... Okay, so if we'll fulfill our tasks, then we'll definitely have this victory. I'm confident that we'll have this victory. And I hope this will happen this year. We have everything to have it this year. We have friends, we have diplomacy, we have you. We have combined everything against this wave of invaders. I think not a single country in the world can withstand on its own something against this war. I think only the United States would be capable to do that, but fortunately they don't have neighbors like that. There's just a couple of countries like that in the world. And Ukraine is facing this war not alone. We have friends. We make sure this aggression, this war would not continue anywhere else. We clearly understand what the Putin wants, what Kremlin wants. We understand what the military political leadership wants. So it's important for everyone to focus, to stay working in their own places, and that's it. And then we'll have victory, because the truth, the righteous, is on our side, and the children that we love. And it's so horrible when we are losing them in the battlefield, around the battlefield. But they, Russians, they have countless of victims and casualties. That's their choice. Now ICTV, Oksana. Good afternoon, Mr. President. First, thank you for your example of resilience, invincibility, and belief. We all believe in the victory, but now a lot of international experts are telling that we have a war of exhaustion, and not a single party would have resources to have an victory, clear victory, and then there will be a negotiation. So how do these negotiations look like? What's the ultimate victory for Ukraine looks like? I'm not thinking theoretically about how those negotiations could take place. We make very specific steps. Ukraine has initiated the peace formula at G20, although we would really like to have it G19 and not G20 in the world. So we've briefed everyone on the peace formula, how we see that. And then there's the outcome of what Russia has done here and how it has an impact not only on our security, because there are different crises caused by Russia's aggressive steps. As you know, the occupation of the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, and then the blocking of the sea and all the chains of supply as part of the full security. You know all of those aspects. So what else can I tell you? We've offered the steps. And today we can see some interest in fulfilling this peace formula and supporting that. And I'd like to express words of gratitude to the country, because yesterday, or in fact today night, 41 countries has supported our peace initiative at the General Assembly. So the next step would be to engage as much as possible states for the first summit. I want really this summit to be as much fruitful as possible, so that we would have this summit conducted in a place, in a country that would be able to host as much countries of the world as possible. I'm working with our partners, with the team, in order to make sure that not only the strategic partners that are supporting us from the first days to be there at the Peace Formula Summit. And we're working hard to have representatives from different continents. We're working hard to have Latin America represented at this Global Peace Formula Summit, and so that there would be representatives of the African continent, so they would be engaged in this summit as well. We're also, frankly speaking, I would like to have India, I would like to have China participating. That's true. Our task is to engage as much as possible and to show the whole world that here is the respect to the territorial integrity, to UN Charter, to anyone's right to live. And the more countries will engage, the more support we will have. And we have developed the peace formula in a way which is very democratic. So it's a very clear step. So in order to reduce the risks among the countries supporting us, I mean, any country can support like a single point of this peace formula. They could support a nuclear safety, the environmental safety, and you know how many mines are there around the territory of Ukraine. That's why there is a lot of steps that we've offered. And there is also kind of a step that means the bringing of peace, because we need the security guarantees. And this is something we need, like a security package for Ukraine, for Ukrainians. And already we can see that this is the war that has a very significant impact. So security guarantees for the whole Europe. So when there is this fulfillment and then there is this respect to the international law and to the ordinary people and to the people of Ukraine. So if that would be fulfilled, then we'll get a diplomatic kind of an end of this war. But until that moment, we need to fulfill all these points of respect. Thank you. Now, a Mexican TV, first row, please.
Sorry, Mr. President, you were mentioning the resolution in the United Nations, the more than 140 countries that voted, demanding that Russian forces leave Ukraine immediately and without conditions. What do you say to the countries, the minority, that didn't support that resolution, that voted with Russia against it, or that decided to ignore it?
Ви знаєте, напевно, щоб
in order to understand the war, the consequences and the losses as the result of the war, because you're not only losing the territory, but you're losing people, leaving people. And if you're not at war, if you haven't ever lost anyone, then it's hard for you to understand what's happening. What sort of pain is that for everyone around you? And it's hard to spread this information. And this is why we are working every day in order anyone to understand the consequences of the war, not through having this war, because it's painful, it's a weak position, because you're somewhere there. You're saying that we're not sure that in this way, but in what way? Should you definitely have a war with torturing, with rapes? Should you need to have it in every house of the war so that the people would finally understand the consequences of this bloody war? And then this a big sick leadership of this Russian Federation. Then there is this journalism to have this information being spread. It's hard to get this information to those countries that are voting against it. But still, we are working. There's 141 countries who voted in favor of that. There's this support to territorial integrity and sovereignty. So there's the answer. How these countries are, what sort of attitude do they have? So there's an answer in this support. Yes, they have to withdraw from your sovereign territory. Now, how do we work with the other countries? We do work. And I believe that Ukraine really needs to make steps forward, like towards the African countries. I think we worked not at a sufficient level. We didn't pay sufficient attention to the African countries. That is why we have a special program initiated by Ukraine. We are increasing the number of embassies in the region, and then look at the Grain from Ukraine initiative and other initiatives on food security. So this is what you need to do. A daily investments in peace. I think we wasted that time for many years since the beginning of our independence, and that is why Currently, we are fighting for our independence. And that's not a coincidence. We didn't have a strong fist of partners before the war, and that's right. But now we have it. But we're still lacking a number of individuals at this fist of common support. So, and I'm talking about the African continent, the Latin America. It's also very important, and I would really like to have a conference and a meeting, or rather a summit, with the Latin American countries and Ukraine. And it's very difficult for me to leave outside of Ukraine, but I would go to this meeting to tell their media, to tell their society, like, I'm ready to step forward. Our diplomats are making this step forward. We're ready to work round the clock. If we'll get more hours in the daytime, we will do that. So this is how you would need to work 30 years. Unfortunately, it was the war that made us work so effectively, but nobody would have expected something like that out of neighboring country of Russia, that you would have something like that from Russia. There's this just willingness to destroy us completely, utterly. And that's why it's not a correction of mistakes. I'd like to say that I don't have any questions to anyone. I don't want to deal with that part of the past. I'm looking at the future. We need the total support of the war, and we will be victorious. We're working on that. And that dialogue is absolutely fair. This is a dialogue with many countries. We've worked on the unification of the European countries, and there's not only the EU member nations, but other countries, countries with different status, with neutral status, and we've worked in order to change this neutrality into the non-neutral status to war. This is also very important. We've worked on this every day, a lot. You have worked on that, and the armed forces have worked on that, because the victory is on the battlefield. That gives confidence. Nobody likes losers, however hard it might sound, but that's the truth. Everyone wants to be victorious, and everyone has to work, like inside the country and outside the country. That's the only way to victory.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dear colleagues, Yalta European Strategy, Sir Jeffrey Nice, do you have a question, maybe? First row.
Do I need a microphone?
Yes, you do.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, those fighting for your country, led by you and you, have put you on moral peaks, not just high ground, from which you can make requests or demands of the Western world, whose methods of accountability for war crimes are unsatisfactory, incomplete, and very, very slow. Will you, for yourselves, and also for us, push for reform of those systems or additions to them that will ensure there can be, because this is in your country's interest, the earliest possible and conclusive determination of where moral right in this war is and where moral wrong is? And supplementary to that, Mr. President, will you consider, to the extent possible, ensuring that accountability mechanisms for war crimes are dealt with by Ukrainians in Ukraine and in the Ukrainian language, remembering that the countries supporting you, if they found themselves in your terrible and unhappy situation, would demand nothing less for themselves? Thank you.
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for your question. It's a quite complicated one, but actually it had all the answers in it. It is very profound. And I know there are a lot of risks as far as the peace formula is concerned. Regarding the institutions, first let me speak about the tribunal. Everything starts with political unity. The United Nations platform might not necessarily be the universal one, but there's nothing else that would have more countries that could be politically united. As of now, unfortunately, I don't think there's anything else. And we can support the setting up of the tribunal to hold Russian Federation accountable for war crimes. And we're also working on the mechanism to compensate all the damage caused by Russia on the territory of our country, to our country and to our people. This is a major effort. We're working on it. The diplomats, Office of the President, Mr. Austin, Mr. Yermak, Prosecutor General, the Office of the Prosecutor General, everybody is working hard every day to make sure it is up and running. This is a very sophisticated mechanism. And actually, I have to say that other countries, they are cautious, they are afraid of setting up tribunals. You might understand why that it is. It's a matter of responsibility. But before you go and establish something in your country, you need political will and unification. And UN has been very useful in that respect because any government, country or leader can receive support to that process, and we're working on that as well. We are convinced that the resolutions will be supported and voted for. We're working with certain countries that we see as crucial for the matters of tribunal. We see them as leaders. This is actually the Netherlands. We're working with Mark Rutte. We're working with Mr. Rishi Sunak from the UK, with other countries as well. We are thinking about the compensation mechanism. There has already been a few steps already, and our Baltic friends are very helpful. And Baltic Trio and Poland, they have been supportive along the way. They are supporting us with everything we ask for. Why is it so hard? Because, well, to address the first part of your question, these institutions that you referred to were set up a long time ago. They haven't been through this type of immense aggression, and this bureaucratic system does not give a clear answer to the question of when the justice will be served, when fairness will happen. And for those who lost their homes, the economy, everything, they want justice now, and it makes sense that they want justice and fairness. We have specific examples. We were working on the matter of prisoners of war, and Andriy in particular, and other colleagues, they were taking a great care to check the condition of the prisoners of war. As you've heard, there have been tortures, and now the Red Cross, it's an international institution, they didn't manage to the prisoners of war to check their condition. Are they hardworking, insisting? No. We were insisting and working hard. We were doing our best, paying immense effort to get our men and women out. But to this day, we do not have access to the prisoners of war. And this year, the year is a year of the full-scale war. But we have to remember that the war began in 2014. And we know that there are 125 Crimean Tatars that are political prisoners. What is happening to them now? I remember early into my presidential term, we were returning people back to Ukraine, some political prisoners. Everybody thought they were held in Moscow, but that wasn't the case. They were very, very far in the regions. And it was only thanks to Ukrainian, to the ombudsman, etc. And we worked with the OSCE way back when there were attempts at the Normandy format. The OSCE had to verify a lot of matters related to the security issues. It was very, very hard. There was a matter of authority of power. And, you know, I am tired to hear one answer from many institutions. They keep saying, we don't have the authority to do it. So no universal mandate, etc., etc. But nonetheless, the UN, headed by Antonio Guterres, and well, in us, we became more proactive. Guterres came to Ukraine, and we helped organize the corridor to transport grain with help of Turkey. So being persistent and being committed to change institutions is what helps. Actually, this war helps highlight weaknesses in Ukrainian institutions, in the EU, on the continent in general, and international institutions as well. And how do we change them? A different security infrastructure will emerge after the victory in the war. Somebody from very pro-Ukrainian, China, came up with its peace plan this week. However, we're seeing some actions by China, not very pro-Ukrainian, and we also heard some allegations that China might be supporting weapons to Russia. So what do you think about China's position? Well, I don't think that was China's peace plan. It was not a declaration or resolution. I think that China spoke its mind about the matter. And I actually said it once before. China started talking about Ukraine, and I think this is a good thing. But it actually begs a question. What will these words be followed with? Because the steps that are to be taken, this is what's important, and what these steps are going to lead to for us. Because he's talking about us, China is talking about us. Territorial integrity, well, I think what they are saying looks like respect for territorial integrity, doesn't mention the country, but it's our territorial integrity that has been breached. Nuclear security was mentioned as well. I think this is in line with the interests, global interests, and Ukrainian interest. There are some things that make sense to me. There are things that I disagree with, the entire world I think disagrees with, but nonetheless, this is at least something. And I think that we would be safe to assume that if there are ideas that are aligned with the idea of respect for international law, territorial integrity, and some security considerations, we need to put that to good use. We need to work on that with China. Why not? Our task is to get everyone together to isolate that somebody. Next question from Azerbaijan.
Вітаю, пан президент, азербайджанський журналіст.
Good evening, dear Mr. President. I'm a journalist from Azerbaijan. What is the support to Ukraine from the post-Soviet countries, from Azerbaijan in particular? What specific steps do you anticipate, and what specific steps are you planning to take in internal and external policy? Mr. President, my son asked to take a selfie with you. Would that be okay? We'll start with what your son has asked, and then we'll discuss the question that you posed. Dear colleagues, but this is a bad example. Please don't be doing that. So your question was about my assessment of Azerbaijan's support. Well, actually, the answer is in the question. If an Azerbaijani journalist is asking a question in Ukrainian, that means he has made a choice between Russia and Ukraine. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Regarding President Aliyev, we are in touch with him. We communicate with him. We are grateful for his support that he's extended to Ukraine, and he respects our sovereignty. I think that's priority number one. He has respect for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. He thinks that Crimea is Ukraine. Thank you. Let's talk to this part of the room. NPR, National Public Radio.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me? Oh.
Now yes.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
So General Milley says that you can't achieve your goal of kicking all the Russians out of Ukraine. I wanted to see if you think he's right and what that tells you about continued U.S. support and why.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you for this question. First of all, I know General Milley personally. We had a meeting, and I haven't heard that from him. I respect the opinions and views of the military, especially the partners that have been supporting us, that have been leaders in our support. If General Milley really thinks that, I think I would have heard that before. Secondly, support is everything. So if General Milley
з нашої держави, я думаю, він, а від нього це дуже залежить, він повинен пришвидшити постачання зброї. Мені здається, так повинно бути. Що стосується підтримки в цілому Сполучених Штатів, якщо ви не проти, я додам. Я вважаю, найголовніша відповідь приїзд президента Байдена.
I think the most important was the visit of the President Biden. There's weapons, other things, and it's up to the President and Congress, but first of all, it's support of the public. And I saw that American people, they support us. During my visit to Washington, D.C., I saw people with Ukrainian flags in the street. So I know that the U.S. support is very, very important. And support is weapons, humanitarian assistance, etc., etc. That's one thing. And there's another thing, believing in our victory. And this is what President Biden's visit was about. And President Biden came to us. And General Milley hasn't been here yet. Sky News, Deborah, please.
Thank you very much. Deborah Haynes from Sky News. Do you believe that Ukraine can achieve victory on the battlefield? Or do you believe that ultimately you're going to have to negotiate, maybe even compromise, maybe even talk to Vladimir Putin. And if I may ask a second question, please. Around 20 of NATO's member states have increased their defence spending or made pledges to increase their defence spending following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year. Would you like to see all 30 member states increase their defence spending, given the need to continue to support Ukraine? And that does include the UK, which has yet to do that. Thank you.
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for your question.
Якщо щось забуду, будь ласка, нагадайте мені.
If I forget something, please make sure to remind me.
Дивіться, мені здається, дуже важливий момент. Багато держав.
This important thing. 20 countries is a lot, but there are so many countries around the world who started to increase their defense budget. So this is a complicated matter and requires a complicated answer. There was a previous question, how do you reform institutional security globally? And you are talking about increase in defense budgets. That's the answer. The war in Ukraine gave rise to the resetting. Everybody understood that the systems are not perfect, that we need something more powerful. And I'm not talking about ammunition. There's a lot spent on cybersecurity, information independence, etc., etc. UAVs, IT, cutting-edge technologies. Everybody's clear that there's no cookie-cutter approach. Probably other expenses are increased as well, but bottom line is that what we're seeing now is the security system being reformed, and I think this is the right step to take. And everybody saw what we could expect from the Russian Federation. And this brings us to the idea of compromise and negotiations. And we all saw that nobody ran to buy flowers. Instead, everybody went to buy weapons. Nobody wants to develop business with the Russian Federation. More and more sanctions appear. Sometimes sanctions hurt, but everybody's clear now that they're making you dependent on Russian gas, and if you are that dependent, then you're gonna get cold eventually, because at some point they might start thinking that they want to have their people in your country, they want a part of your territory, and then people realize that we need independence, not just on paper. We need real independence to defend our people, because this is what that one person has done with independent Ukraine, who was a neighbor and even, so to say, a friend yesterday. So this brings me back to the first part of your question. After everybody saw that they kill people, that they torture people, and they're not even trying to hide their attacks. They're talking about nuclear matters. They decided to take Iranian drones and kill civilians. And those civilians did not have guns in their hands. They had their children in their hands. And seeing this picture of the world, do you think we Ukrainians could sit at this to negotiate with all of this? I don't know how to call that. We call this phenomena Russism. I don't have a better word to put it. So that's the answer. We need to start from scratch. We need to go back to what was violated. Our right to live on our land needs to be respected. Leave our territory, withdraw, stop shelling us, stop killing civilians, stop destroying our infrastructure, energy sector, potable water, stop air strikes on the cities, stop killing dogs, cats, animals, stop burning the forest. So you go ahead and stop doing all of that, and only after that we'll tell you what format will be used to diplomatically put an end to it.
Okay, now the Ukrainian Pravda, please, from this part of the audience.
Добрий день, Володимир Олександрович.
Good afternoon. Roman Krovets, Ukrainska Pravda. I'd like to go back to the major topic of this press conference. That's the year of the war. It's time for some intermediate conclusions, and my question is sort of personal. It's composed of three components. First, can you recall your personal, the most horrible day and the horrible night of the full-scale war? And second, we all humans, we can all make mistakes. Now, what's your biggest mistake over the period of the full-scale war? And third, who, over this period of the full-scale war, among your team, who sort of disappointed you? Thank you. Okay, I'd like to start with the one who disappointed me. Sorry, because who disappointed? All those who left on the 24th of February, all those who left Kiev, all those who were leaving cities and towns, all those who were supposed to fight for the country, who had to take care of the security of this country. So all these people have disappointed me. Now, my largest mistake, I don't know. I think there was some of them, because I'm working from early morning to late night. I'm a living person, and no matter how someone might think of that, so I make choices, so I am convinced that I'm making mistakes from time to time. What's important is that for me not to have any fatal mistakes, because I'm a guarantor of the Constitution, I'm the guarantor of the national security. So what's important is that I won't make any fatal mistakes. Now, with God's help, I've haven't made any mistakes like that. Now, what was the horrible day, or the horrible night, the most horrible night? Over this year, I think Bucha. What I saw. The moment we've deoccupied Bucha, it was horrible. What we've seen, you know, the devil is not somewhere in the bottom, but he's among us. He's on this land. Now the Japanese company. Now I'd like to ask the colleagues to to pay respect to their colleagues. So just to ask one question, so please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Ada Suleiman. I'm from NHK Japanese TV. There is a G7 summit in Japan in May. Are you considering joining the G7? Because the Japanese only prime minister from G7 countries didn't visit Kyiv yet. So what's the role of the Japan in G summit to accelerate the support to Ukraine? Thank you.
За годину. Дякую за запитання. Значить, що важливо?
Thank you for your question. Now, what's important? We have full support of the G7 countries, and Now Japan is having the presidency. So I just write down a number of things because there's so much things is happening. So 40 minutes before this press conference, I had a meeting with the J7. Part of the information that we've discussed will be open, and then some of the information will be sensitive. Now, talking about the support that is required to Ukraine and what the G7 is ready to provide to us, there's a significant package of support, and some support is coming from Japan. Let me concentrate now on Japan. So I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister. We have a great understanding. He's very straightforward. So, and at a time of war, I have understood the true value of people being straightforward. There's a clear understanding and clear support. I understand the amount of fund that the Prime Minister is going to coordinate with the Parliament. I believe that's the mechanism for your country, that they need to coordinate the support for Ukraine. I don't remember all the details, but I feel this support and those messages that I've received from the G7 countries. Now, I was invited by the Prime Minister to visit Japan. That was earlier. We've received those signals over the diplomatic channels. The Prime Minister of Japan has received multiple invitations to arrive to Ukraine. He accepted one of the invitations, so I don't know when he will come to Ukraine, but we are really looking forward to his visit, because Japan has provided very significant support to Ukraine. I want to assure you of that. And the role of Italy that has played in the EU. And, you know, there's a parallel in Japan playing a role in G7. I think somewhere after the end of this war, we'll be able to talk about this role, because that role is very crucial. It's very positive, and I'm absolutely grateful for this. Now, the CDF. Please, in that angle.
Okay. Ulf Schmiese, German television. Mr. President, 1 year ago, you've been the most wanted person worldwide. Now you are traveling sometimes abroad. You give press conferences without an embargo. Well, yeah. What makes you feel safer now? Are you less a target for Putin?
I always thought that Germans have more information about Putin's thoughts than I am. But anyways.
Such questions, sorry. So anyway.
So what am I doing? My task as the president, as the leader of our country, not to make even an assumption of support to Ukraine being weaker. I think that the unity of the world and maintaining this unity, this is my task. Whether I'm doing that right or wrong, I'm not alone in doing that, but still, there's moments, like in the beginning was a difficult moment, but we've demonstrated that we could have achievements, and I had rough dialogues with many, both official and unofficial, and it was a kind of a moment like that, and then the sun has risen in the ocean, and everyone has seen that we are strong. And it's not just a matter of we are stockpiling weapons, for example, somewhere. No. We need that to survive. We're not fighting. We are struggling for our life. And then there was a different stage. And then it was difficult. And it was fatigue. Well, the beginning of the fatigue. And it's absolutely fair for everyone. Every people has their own questions, challenges, prices, waves of inflation, many other things. The energy crisis, food crisis because of Russia's blocking seaports and doing many other things, causing many crises. And there are ordinary people. There's, some of your thoughts, but then deep in your heart there's the support in Ukraine to Ukraine. But so on the one hand there's the support to Ukraine, but on the other hand there's your own family. But it's important that everyone to know that this is not our war. We are fighting for all of you, and it's not this war that caused the crisis. It's the Russia that is intentionally causing this crisis in order to weaken your support and to blame Ukraine for this crisis. So my task is doing everything possible so that the world support would not be weaker. But I would like to underline that I wasn't alone in doing so. I was working together with the team, with the office of the President, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the Cabinet of Ministers, with everyone, with the Parliament, with everyone. Everyone who wanted to do that. And that is a very important aspect. And then there's this moment when you need to show gratitude to the world for not being alone and for even being gratitude to those countries who at first thought of not supporting you but then supported you. So now the moment has time to show your own words of gratitude, because now these countries have their own challenges. So I wanted to come and to support those people. It's absolutely fair because they done a lot. I don't know how many people were saved by many countries. I mean, Germany has done a lot of contributions, and in the EU, because they've contributed money to the weapons, to the tanks, whether someone might want it or no, or like it or no. That's a fact. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to go and to start a new page for all of us, for our capabilities. Air defense, aircrafts, tanks, long-range weapons. That's my task that I need to discuss one-on-one with the leaders. Now, 1FM, please, at the central row, central aisle.
Good morning, good evening, Mr. President. Thank you for receiving us today. Emmanuel Macron, I'm a journalist from the French news channel BFM TV. Our President, Emmanuel Macron, said a few days ago that he wanted the defeat of Moscow, but without crushing Russia. Do you think it is compatible with a full victory of Ukraine? What do you think about this position? And if I may add a second question, you talked about the worst day of the war for you. What, on the contrary, what's been the victory you've been the most proud of, the most happy about since the beginning of the war? Thank you very much.
Emmanuel.
Now, about Emmanuel.
Many
countries started to speak about what's going to happen after the defeat. I believe that this is informationally in favor to Ukraine. Now, what's going to be happening after this defeat? And it's important that the faith of the countries and the faith of the societies, because they always sort of get together and they always respond to the atmosphere. So that's a signal to all of us that most of the countries, primarily from Europe, they believe in the victory of Ukraine. And therefore they believe in the defeat of the Moscow. Now the major question, what you said. Now, what's going to happen to the Russia? Do you mean this one? Do you mean That, well, actually, I don't care what's going to happen to Russia, frankly speaking. They have their own state. They have to think of their own country. If they would be thinking about their own country, there would be no war. If they would be thinking about their own democracy, freedom of speech, democratic reforms, not having slavery, prosperity instead, then it would be a wealthy country, because from the standpoint of natural resources, they're a wealthy state, but that takes time. You need to think of that. And we are currently working, we're currently thinking. So if we're thinking about the development, then we'll have no time thinking about the aggression or whatsoever. Well, how to cope with COVID. Remember, that was a big challenge to everyone in the world, when all the countries, the adequate countries in the world, like they were then thinking what to do to their society. Now, someone else is thinking now, how about I do something against someone? So it's all about their question, their future, their destiny. Now, I don't think of this. I don't want to say that some leaders are mistaken about something. No, everyone has their own point to raise, but I think that the elite, the business, which is sanctioned in a very fairly manner, their accounts being blocked, their yachts being blocked by the oligarchs of Russia, their real estate, their business outside of Russia is also being blocked. All of that is something that these wealthy people are not very happy about. They had their children studying abroad, that's their right. Now they're deprived of all this comfort. But what do they have? They have what is left in Russia. Now, do you think they would allow really to have 20 or 40 more Russias instead of one? Do you think they would be sharing their own business with someone? Do you think they would be happy about everything being blocked abroad, and they would be not thinking about how to save their money? You know, we think of many different things. And I think they would be able to cope with that on their own. More pressure, more sanctions, more isolation against Russia. In this case, their elite would think what to do inside of their own country, so that with their own new policy, someone might be willing to negotiate. I mean, we are interested in that. Thank you. Maybe a question in Russian at a TV channel called Freedom. Good afternoon. Ksenia Barvinenko, the channel, there will be a question in Ukrainian, even though that's the Russian channel. A year ago, when we were all shocked with the full-scale war, still everyone was calling upon our Western partners to provide us the aircraft to close the sky above Ukraine. At that point, everyone was telling that it's impossible. Well, the same was about Leopards, but Leopards are already in Ukraine. Now, talking about the aircrafts, there's a lot of debates. We can hear a lot of statements. 3 weeks ago, the US President Joe Biden said that they're not transferring F-16s to Ukraine. And then we're hearing statements from our politicians, from our ministers, that there is already a dialogue and there will be a positive decision for Ukraine. Now, can you explain what's the real situation with the F-16s? When are we going to have them? Maybe if not F-16s, maybe F-22 Raptors or something newer.
The Victory Day, I would like to finish answering the question of the French journalist. The Victory Day is going to be the happiest day for me, and not only for me, but for every Ukrainian. And now to your question. Regarding armaments,
натівського зразка або західного зразка у нас
There are different types of native weapons that we didn't have, and it's understandable because we're not a member of NATO. And I think it's a great accomplishment that we started receiving the 155 millimeter caliber of artillery, HIMARS. So that was a victorious page in this war. It was very timely and it's very accurate and precise. Armored vehicles, we need them to protect our people. And there are all sorts of armored vehicles, BMPs, BTRs, tanks, and initially nobody even wanted to hear about the tanks. You were right. But then we found a moment, we found a key, and we did something. Last autumn, we saw that we are capable to take back our land. The occupation of the Kharkiv region was crucial, as well as Kherson's deoccupation. Without that, we wouldn't have been successful in receiving new types of weapons. I believe nobody in Ukraine couldn't even fathom that we would have Patriots. But now we are receiving help. People believe in us. There's a tank coalition. This is a lengthy, hefty process. This is the only weakness, because time means more people that we lose. And it's horrible to be losing our defenders. So that is why expediting deliveries of weapons, expediting delivery of not only air defense, but counter UAVs technologies, sea drones, etc., and also aircraft. And our partners, they know that we want to use that to protect our sky, to protect our people and our infrastructure. And that is why we started working on it. I had a meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and actually this meeting is an answer to the question whether Ukraine stands the chance of receiving high-level aircrafts. The training with the UK is starting. I had a meeting with Polish Prime Minister Mr. Morawiecki today. We are looking into training opportunities. We are negotiating. And there are 3 more European countries that we can receive training and aircraft from. It is also a matter of time because it requires training, but this is what we're looking forward to, comprehensive protection of our sky. Financial Times in the center. In the center, please.
Gillian Tet, Financial Times. A very quick question. You talked about the Chinese peace proposal and welcomed some element of it, but it did not mention at all the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. Given the views of the parliamentarians, does that mean the Chinese peace proposal is dead in the water?
Ви сказали, що буде коротке питання.
You said it was going to be a short question. Well, it's only a short question when the answer is short. Well, everywhere, whether it's China, it's very hard to find a short answer.
Я не вважаю, що те, що
I don't think that what China did was an offer in and of itself. I believe it's only the state on whose territory the war is taking place can do that. So we came up with an offer of our own. We came up with a peace formula. Well, I think it was an important signal that China looks like is going to participate in it. That seemed as their views. As of now, I'm seeing this as a signal only. I don't know what comes next. It depends on the further steps taken. I want to believe that China is going to side with the idea of fair peace and fairness, which is our side. I really want to believe that China is not going to supply weapons to Russia. This is very important. This is priority number one for me, and I'm doing my best to prevent that from happening. It is very important for us. Because, you know, it's better the way things are for China now than in Russia's embrace. Because, you know, there's this risk of the Third World War. And only after we see specific steps will we be able to discuss them. So far, I'm just seeing an opinion. The most important is territorial integrity, and territorial integrity implies withdrawal of Russian troops. If it's not there, that means it is not okay with us, the way it is written now. If this is what's implied, that there is no withdrawal of Russian troops. Prime Minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt, no question?
Okay. Thank you. Then next, Anadolu Agency, please, here.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I ask a question in Russian? If Turkish President Erdogan prepared for negotiations in Istanbul, and if Russian President were to wait for you there, would you accept that? Are you from the Turkish television, Turkish news agency in Turkey? I just had a conversation with President Erdogan before our press conference. We had a nice conversation. I expressed my condolences, you know, that this is a tragedy for us as well. And the President reached out to me, and we sent Ukrainian specialists to help with this earthquakes situation. We sent cargo planes. This hurts us too. As a country in war, we perceive this pain as our own. I'm very grateful to President Erdogan for his assistance, with the grain trade matter, with Azov regiment. We managed to return some of the men that could have been executed. It wasn't all of them, but still, President Erdogan has done some things that are very, very useful to Ukraine. And he knows what I think about what you asked about in your question. He knows about my views. I reached out to him and we discussed it even before the war. And I told him, as well as I told that to many other people, I said to him, make sure Putin agrees to sit at the negotiation table. We cannot have a full-scale war happen. And he couldn't do it. But now he thinks he can. But we no longer are able to go for that. It's a different person. Putin, there's nobody to talk to. Ukrainian Novina News Agency. Good evening, Mr. President. If I may, I'd like to ask a question about internal matters. internal processes. As we remember, in 2021, the National Defense and Security Council imposed sanctions against 100 Ukrainians, the so-called blacklist, the U.S. blacklist. Those were the people that were sanctioned there. And there were a lot of well-known businessmen, high-ranking officials in that list. But also some people were missing in that list, and they should have been there. In particular, I'm talking about an official, Eduard Stavitsky, now known as Nathan Rosenberg. In 2021, the U.S. Treasury imposed sanctions against him, but unfortunately he's not under sanctions now. And you know what kind of person he is. You know that he's been anti-Ukrainian, he's prosecuted by our Ukrainian law enforcement. So the question is, how can you explain that during the 9th year of the war and 2nd year of the full-scale war, people from Yanukovych circles still have businesses in Ukraine? It is not sanctioned. And one more. Well, just a minute. Let's answer. Let's address this one. First of all, I'm not quite clear who you were talking about. Well, every time the U.S. gave us a list of person-to sanctions, we would mirror that and sanction them. And if the person you're talking about is culpable, then we will correct ourselves. But you have to be clear that we're talking about hundreds of people that were sanctioned. I cannot have information and know about each and every one of them. Well, you could just give me the materials. Bogdanov, who is Bogdanov? Reznikov-Budanov's case. We remember what happened and what didn't happen. You understand what I'm talking about, right? I just wanted to hear from you what happened exactly. Please ask a question. Was there talk of replacing the Minister of Defense, Reznikov? In particular, Mr. Budanov was a candidate, but he wasn't appointed due to some reasons. Well, the reason was that it's only the civilian that has to be a Minister of Defense, but he's military, and so that runs contrary to the law. Did you have a conversation with Reznikov and Budanov about the situation? Well, the decisions that I'm making as a Supreme Commander-in-Chief with regards to the security and defense of our country is something that I do not discuss publicly, some of the decisions. One of those decisions is security situations in some areas of the country and some institutions. I had some ideas. I'm not talking about the ministry specifically, but rather about the infrastructure that is supposed to be providing security. So I was thinking about making them stronger with different approaches. And this was with regards to the border regions of Ukraine and temporarily occupied close to the line of contact, bordering the occupied territories. And this is the context in which I was discussing this matter. Had I wanted to appoint our main intelligence official as a defense minister, we would have done it in line with the Ukrainian legislation, of course. IEC-24, Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Regarding Iran, you reportedly said last week to our Israeli foreign minister that Ukraine and Iran and Israel share a common enemy inside Iran, in the Iranian regime. Now, how does Israel help Ukraine in curbing the Iranian military aid to Russia, maybe with intelligence, maybe with know-how, and also, you know, these alleged Israeli strikes on Iranian military infrastructures, do they actually help Ukraine?
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for your question.
Довгий час впродовж цієї війни я
For a long time during this war, I was really looking forward to Israeli support, not only from the public, but also from their political leadership, from various institutions. It was important. Historically, Ukraine has had amazing relations with Israel, and there were various conversations at different levels with different officials, public and non-public meetings in different formats and in different places. And it was hard to change their position because Israel has quite an easy situation with relations with Russia, Syria, etc. But I really want them to be not a mediator, but I'd really want them to choose a side, Ukrainian side, because I cannot imagine Israel supporting war. Israel is a country that for dozens of years has had war, so I couldn't even fathom that. And I'd like to address what you asked about. I know I have all the answers to the question, but unfortunately I will not be able to share them here. I cannot jeopardize the improvement of Ukraine and Israel relations that has begun. SBS Australia and then SBT Brazil after them.
G'day, Mr. President. Most of your allies have reopened their embassies here in Kyiv. Australia has not, citing security concerns. Would you like to see Australia's ambassador return to Ukraine? And if he does not, will it affect relations between Australia and Ukraine?
Приємно мати справи з таким журналістом.
It's so nice to hear a question that you can say yes to.
Наступне, пане президент.
I'll be very happy. Really, I have relations with Australia, and really they really helped us a lot. And you know, the very important thing, I had big, huge deficit with armed vehicles, and it's very important. Yes, moment, and I don't want now to share all information how many we've got from Australia, but anyway, we've got it, and that is great. That's why to shake hand the ambassador of Australia, I'll do it with pleasure. Please come back, but on Bushmaster. We need one more.
Далі, будь ласка, Бразилія.
Brazil.
Mr. President, President Lula is trying to gather countries outside Europe and North America to facilitate, to bring both sides to the negotiation table. Have you talked to him about this proposal? And you know that Brazil is supporting Ukraine in the UN, but has a different approach on sanctions, delivery of weapons and ammunition. What do you expect from Brazil, from another American countries? And when are you going to talk to President Lula? Дякую.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you. I've sent him invitations to arrive to Ukraine. I'm really looking forward to have a meeting with him. I would really like him to assist me and support me with a platform for conversations with Latin America. I'm really interested in it.
I really appreciate some of the steps of Brazil, really, of supporting us, our territorial integrity and sovereignty. That is for us so important, especially now. Yes, and what I'm just waiting for our meeting, because eyes to eyes, face to face, I will be more understandable, and I think Ukraine will be more understandable. That's it. Thank you.
Now, Vipro from Netherlands, please.
Mr. President, thank you very much. First of all, do you think in your lifetime you will see President Putin inside an international court, for example in The Hague, the international capital of justice? And second, you just met the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, and you talked about the delivery of F-16s. Is it correct, that's what we heard, that Ukrainian pilots will be trained to fly on the F-16s, for example, by the Netherlands?
Well, it appears that both the first and the second question, it all depends on Mark Rutte. I mean, the situation in Hague and the possibility of providing us with aircrafts. So, I believe that it's important for Ukraine that we have a very good personal relations with Mark. We have a very good relationship with Mark Rutte. So it's good for Ukraine. Thank you. Okay, we can proceed. But looking at what you've said in the very beginning, yes, it's important to, well, to settle this matter with the accountability, with justice till the very end. I mean, having killed so many people, so many civilians, so you can't just have the situation at a stop, as we can see from different political proposals, like searching for a way out. Look, there's so many people being killed, and here is this leader of Russia, leader of a great country, and they have to take responsibility. It's not a child. It's not a child who broke something and you can simply forgive that. And I think then there is the different age when you need to be responsible for the crimes committed, to stand trial. Because, there is a room for jokes, and that's something you would like to watch with popcorn, but that's only if that would be funny. But that's a tragedy. There's so many people, civilians killed, and that is why you would need to take responsibility for what was done, and I sincerely hope there would be this responsibility.
This photo, these are the sunflowers of the location where MH17 was down in Ukraine. As you know, many Dutch people were on board of that plane, as other nationalities. Have we got a common goal to get President Putin in front of judges, because Dutch investigations found out that President Putin decided to down MH17, as he has decided to go into your country. And the Dutch photographer wanted to give you this photo of the sunflowers on that location of MH17.
Please keep your photo, and we'll take it after the press conference.
No.
After the press conference, please.
But I know, I had so many different presidents from different countries, and always they said, our bodyguards or Sergei, they said after, and you will see something after, but I didn't see yet. That's always like this. So thank you that you showed me. I will remember it. Yeah. Що стосується,
Now,
послухайте, в чому сила,
what's
я
the
вважаю,
main strength of Ruta
в чому сила вашої системи,
and your
і в
system?
чому сила результату,
And
щодо
what's
того чи
the
іншого суду.
strengths of the results and the outcomes and the court rulings? I believe that Hague and Netherlands and Mark,
Нам здається, що ми хочемо, ми про це сьогодні говорили, що
this is something we've talked about today, that the justice, it's very hard to have it. But what's important is that Netherlands always gets things done till the very end, just as it was with MH17. So I hope the same would be with the war, that we together will have this case towards the court and towards the fair court ruling. Now from Spain, and while you are waiting for the microphone, it's getting darker now, and different countries are now illuminating their buildings, and we can see Madrid, while they will have questions from Spain.
I would like you to comment on the Spanish support that yesterday our Prime Minister promised that maybe he will send 10 tanks, or he will consider sending 10. And which role can Spain play in your goal to get closer to Latin America? Thank you.
Yesterday. Was it yesterday? Was that yesterday that we had a meeting with Pedro? Oh, it was yesterday, indeed. So yesterday we had a meeting with Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain. First and foremost, I want to say that we had a lot of skepticism in Europe, and that's correct in terms of our candidacy. And we met Pedro, he met Ukraine, he got accustomed with Ukraine. So Ukrainians played a great role. He saw our country, he saw what we are fighting for, he saw the way we're changing. What's important that he saw that institutionally we were running in parallel. I mean, everyone has continued to work. All the banking institutions, the rest of the institutions still working despite the war. And I think it's great that he came in April. He was among the first leaders to arrive to Ukraine. So we found the relationship through him. And I think that the Spanish society has understood Ukraine better through him as well. And then there was this attitude of your society towards our internally displaced persons and refugees. If I'm not mistaken, there's 165,000 Ukrainians currently hosted in Spain, and that's a lot of people. He understands what we are fighting for. He supports us in the EU, and I know that he's supporting us in the security matters within the NATO. And from what I can see, that Pedro Sanchez, we've already established some personal connections with him. He said that we will help. He said that about increasing the number of tanks, and I think that's his authority to say how much more tanks he can get for Ukraine. We talked about other equipment for Ukraine. We are grateful because we had some previous conversations about Hawks. That's the air defense systems that we were supposed to receive, then some other gear and ammunition to reinforce the capabilities of our forces. So that's something that we have. Then NBC, please.
Thank you, President Zelenskyy. Last week, the president of Poland had said that if this war is still going on 1 year from today, there's a real danger that an empowered Russia will invade another state. Given how effectively you have held back a Russian advance with NATO's help here in Ukraine, is it even conceivable that Russia could invade another state, particularly a NATO state?
На жаль, так.
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, I believe it's possible. And that might happen. Why? I can give you an explanation. President Putin needs to demonstrate successes and victories. So there is not going to be a success on the battlefield in Ukraine, and he will not succeed with the massive revenge in Ukraine. So he would need to demonstrate success, and everyone understands that he can have success in weak areas, and better it would be countries that was under the influence of Moscow before the war or during the Soviet times, and it's better to have some sort of conflicts or maybe some sort of
І тут Молдова, ви знаєте приклад Молдови.
You know the examples of Moldova. You know that our intelligence have intercepted the documents, and I openly, publicly told this. I brought this information to the EU. I have provided that. Well, the moment I have received this information, I transferred that information to the President Mayassandu, and there's evidences that they wanted to replace the leadership of the country. Now, let's think how they can do that. How? I mean, they don't have common borders with Moldova. That means there would be an amphibious operation. That means an attack from the Transnistria or the attack of the Chisinau. So that's something that is happening, and they might be doing that. They might be developing this direction, because I don't remember when was the meeting. It was on the 10th of February. There was the meeting in Brussels. Now then, that's the end of. Now we have this end of February. That's the 24th. So it took them 2 weeks to find a different informational attack. So now they're saying that the situation at the borders, along the contact line between the Transnistria and Ukraine. Now, at this area, they're saying that there's some misunderstandings, some shots being fired, and they're saying through the media that Ukraine is planning to go to Transnistria. Why? Because they clearly understand that we respect the territorial integrity of Moldova. And we believe that the territory of Transnistria is, in fact, the territory of the independent country of Moldova. And they keep provoking us. From the very beginning of the war, we had some shots fired from Transnistria, and they wanted us to go there. And I told Moldova to think about this and to how to settle this issue, because that was a very difficult situation. That was in the beginning of the war. They tried to provoke from different sides. It was informational hybrid war and steps being made like that. So I think that Russia will try to have at least some sort of success. Look, a missile crossed the airspace of Romania. You know that, and then that missile hit the Ukrainian territory. So they will keep on doing steps like that. I mean, Russians, and it's better to prevent such capabilities through sanctions and through making any other steps. We have a question, maybe from this area. We have a question from Romanian National TV.
Mr. President.
Wait for your microphone,
Mr. President,
please.
if after a year of war, even more, you may feel that solidarity in other countries may be diminishing, can be tiring, what is your message to them? Thank you, Mr. President.
Який меседж? Складно говорити про зменшення підтримки України,
to talk about diminishing support for Ukraine when you keep showing everything in yellow and blue in different parts of the world, and I'm very grateful for this. You can't reduce steps like that or diminish steps like that. You can't diminish work that you're doing. And of course, you should not reduce the support to Ukraine. What I'd like to tell your societies, maybe you learned more about people from Ukraine, because you've hosted a lot of people who are forced to leave, primarily women and children. And I believe you understand that the majority of them, they're willing to return, and by helping Ukraine, you're helping all of them. Now, if you will reduce that support, that's your support, that's the support of your integrity, of your sovereignty. Just now we told you that a missile crossed your airspace, but you're a NATO member nation. Now, God forbid this missile will hit your territory, what the NATO will do? They will have to select what to do. Should they preserve the unity in NATO and show the strength, or no? Now, they would need to show the strengths, they would need to search for the response options, different ones. I'm not deciding that. We're not a NATO member nation. But I want my voice to be heard not by the NATO member nations, but the societies of these countries. These people, the ordinary people. Ukraine has no right to fall just for the sake of preserving or defending the European continent from the horrible war. Because I believe that Russia may proceed with its actions. Now, look at the countries where they would like to have like an influence, just like it was during the Soviet times. Where did they have their KGB? Where did they have their armed forces being deployed? Now, let's analyze where they might be happening, and you will understand that this will be a chaos. We cannot let this happen. Now let's have a question from Suspilne, please.
Thank
you for this possibility. Mr. President, surely you know that thousands of Ukrainian children have been abducted and deported from the occupied territory, from the destroyed cities. And this is an unprecedented situation when so many children have been abducted. And they were forcibly kept in the boarding houses, boarding facilities. So I have a very simple question. How and when we will return those children? Are we making some steps now? What can we do with the help of the international organizations and our partners?
Thank you. We cannot take the children back by force because we cannot enter the territory of Russian Federation. No global institutions can do that by force either. They cannot do it either because they don't have a mandate or because Russia doesn't want to let them in. So what we can do, we can exert pressure. There's going to be United for Justice conference in Lviv, and there will be Prosecutor Han invited high-ranking leaders, prosecutors, international organizations, and different solutions are going to be discussed. Sexual violence tribunals, kidnapping of children, crime of aggression, etc., environmental matters. So that's one line of work. Secondly, our ombudsman is working. We have a coordination center that is working. It's very hard. Russians think that they didn't steal anyone. They believe that they provided shelter for those who were fleeing Nazi. the children will return home. And there will be accountability for what was done. So that's it at the moment. We are talking to the leaders about it. It is important that this matter has become one of the most important in the agenda. It is being discussed with leaders in the European Union, and I'm convinced that the more we bring it up, the more we'll be able to locate those families, the places where our children are, the higher the chances that this helps. This is not just a clear path, a clear plan. The only thing that is certain is that we need to deoccupy our land. I don't think we'll be able to return 100% of the children as of now, but after our victory, the children have to come back home. ABC.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. Mr. President, opinion polls in the United States are suggesting that a growing number of Americans believe that the US is giving too much support to Ukraine. What would your message be on the anniversary to those Americans? Thank you.
I would like to thank the American people. I would like to thank all of the American people that are supporting Ukraine, the Congress, the President, the TV channels, the journalists, and everyone that has been supporting us. And that percentage of Americans, as you've mentioned, is increasing. I can tell them only one thing. If they do not change their opinion, if they do not understand us, if they do not support Ukraine, they will lose NATO, they will lose the clout of the United States, they will lose the leadership position that they are enjoying in the world, that they are enjoying for a very fair reason, and they will lose the support of the country with 40 million of population, with millions of children. Are American children any different than ours? Don't Americans enjoy the same things as we do? I don't think we're that different. And I'm actually very happy that we have bipartisan support, but we keep hearing those messages from time to time, and they're dangerous. There are political leaders that are elected by people, and if this issue is raised, those political leaders need to be responsible and cautious because people are looking at them. Who wants a Third World War? Would anyone would anyone be willing to accept that risk? The U.S. is never going to give up on the NATO member states. If it happens so that Ukraine, due to various opinions and weakening and depleting of assistance, loses, Russia is going to enter Baltic states, NATO member states, and then the U.S. will have to send their sons and daughters exactly the same way as we are sending their sons and daughters to war, and they will have to fight because it's NATO that we're talking about, and they will be dying, God forbid, because it's a horrible thing. I wish peace and Ukrainian support to the United States. TV4, Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Anders Kraft from Swedish TV4. Thank you for your hospitality. The people here are very nice. It's my first time in Ukraine. Today, Sweden decided to donate or send more tanks and more military aid, including Leopard tanks. Do you have a special message, something for my viewers, the Swedes, today?
I would like to thank them. This is. I would like to thank them. Genuinely, I'm very grateful to Sweden. This is a very powerful aid package. We are enjoying amazing relations with Sweden, with Swedish leadership at various levels. And we have some very high-quality meetings and negotiations, and there was a very good visit of the Prime Minister, and we are about to reach a very important decision. And it's hard work, so I wouldn't want to give details of it now, because we all need to prepare for that properly. But there's one thing I would like to say. You're doing a great job. It's a great decision that you made to become NATO members. And as you know, Putin managed to unite a lot of countries, people in those countries. And I'm very happy for you. I'm very happy for Finland, because it all means NATO becoming stronger. And NATO becoming stronger is not about stronger armies. It's about better security. So that is why we want to be a member of the alliance. We want to be protected. We want to be helping others. It's about collective security. So I'm very happy. There are some things to work on, and I'll be honest with you. You have to know that Ukraine is also helping Sweden. Thank you. South Korea.
You have been listening to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy giving one of a series of addresses today in the capital, Kyiv, and answering a range of questions from the media. He spoke about his peace formula. He talked about war crimes and bringing perpetrators to justice. He addressed the support from all the countries standing at Ukraine's side, and also those countries who are not so keen to offer their support. Joining me here in the studio to break down everything that he talked about is DW senior political analyst Melinda Crane. Melinda, he talked about an awful lot of things there, showing off his very well-known communication skills, often striking a very personal tone. What stood out for you in what he said?
Well, first of all, absolutely his stamina and endurance. You know, this is a man who is working 24/7, and yet the questions kept on coming, and he kept on answering them. And as you said, often showing a lot of personal emotion. For example, when he talked about Buchta, the town in Ukraine where evidence of mass murder and war crimes came to light last April, and he was, you know, there was deep sorrow in his voice and in the pause that he took before answering. We also heard a lot of firm resolve there. We heard humor and warmth, for example, in his outreach to Australia and also to Brazil, saying, please help us, you know, come to us. We heard professions of gratitude, not only to the U.S., which you might expect, but also to countries that had been, as he said, hesitant, but now had come around. And there he named Germany by name, not always an easy relationship, but a lot of gratitude there as well. And we saw some very careful diplomatic skills at work as well. For example, when he said to the U.S., you know, if you start backing down from supporting us, think about what you're going to be losing. You will lose your leadership position in the world. Or most especially when he talked about China, where he was very, very cautious in his wording. He tried to be positive. He said, you know, they have put this out out on the table, and it's important that they're part of the discussion. And at the same time, he indicated his very strong awareness that should China move to deliver weapons to Russia, it could be a game changer for this war. He referred to World War III in that context, and he said, I am doing everything I can to prevent that. So an enormous range in his answers.
And he did go into quite a lot of detail about his peace formula, didn't he? The 10 points put forward at the UN, on which he was saying that all progress towards peace must now be based.
Right. So what's that about? Well, he said again and again, we cannot negotiate with Vladimir Putin right now. This peace formula that was actually put out there as early as last fall is about essentially establishing the conditions under which Ukraine could imagine peace. So putting those conditions out before they get to a negotiating table. And they include the traditional pillars of any conflict termination, which is a cessation of hostilities, withdrawal of troops, restoration of territorial integrity, return of war prisoners and detainees. But they also go beyond that, and that's where it really gets interesting, because essentially the other conditions are part of a larger framework that would allow Ukraine to believe it could build a future free of threat from Russia. So that includes food security, energy security, nuclear security, security guarantees from other countries, because they're not going to become a member of NATO anytime soon. This would essentially be a form of guaranteeing security in the event of any attack. And very, very important, war crimes prosecutions. That has been something that has come up again and again today. We heard it when he talked about the children being kidnapped. Clearly a very key issue for Ukraine.
I did want to talk to you about the war crimes. It was brought up a couple of times by different journalists. He spoke about the work being done now to bring perpetrators to justice, but it just seems like almost an impossible task, doesn't it? Why does this matter so much? And can it really ever happen, bringing these people to justice?
So President Zelenskyy called very directly, and by the way, so as well did Mr. Kuleba in the Security Council discussions, for a criminal tribunal for Russia itself. Why that? Because we have an international criminal court in place, but neither Ukraine or Russia are parties to that, and therefore we could not see such prosecutions occur there. So, first question, will they ever occur at all? I have to out myself here. I actually did a lot of coverage in the early 90s of the foundation of the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, which eventually became the International Criminal Court. We said at that time, is this ever going to happen? Could we imagine, as Yugoslavia was falling apart and there was fighting in Bosnia, in Kosovo, in Croatia, in Serbia, that we would ever see Milosevic in the dock? We did see that happen. Things can change. Therefore, we should never believe that prosecutions will not occur. And why are they important? They are under the Security Council's jurisdiction precisely because they are a peacemaking measure. We have worried so often about the fact that Russians don't seem to know what's going on in their country. They don't seem to know what this war has meant for the Ukrainians. Trials are a way for them to learn about that. That means that is a way for Russia itself to rebuild after this terrible conflict. We should never give up on war crimes.
DW senior political analyst Melinda Crane helping us break down everything that President Zelenskyy just said. Thank you so much. Now, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is among the world leaders marking the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine by making an address about the conflict. Speaking today, Scholz said that Russia has failed in its war aims and that he pledged that there'll be no let-up in support for Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
Today, on 24 February, we see the first anniversary of the Russian attack against Ukraine, a war which marked a watershed moment. For 1 year now, the Ukraine has been in a brave and resilient